Great. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to our webinar. We're very excited to have everyone here. All right. This is our webinar today. It's called Unlocking the Secrets Behind Streaming Success. In response to requests from our loyal participants, we're excited to bring you this extremely relevant and fascinating program about streaming success in our industry. My name is Susan Waldman, and I'm the Senior Manager of Chapters and Membership at NAMIC. Your feedback has a direct impact on our programming, and this session is a result of your valuable feedback. At the end of today's webinar, please take a moment to complete our survey and continue shaping future offerings. We are thrilled to introduce our speaker, Anthony Palomba, a professor of media and entertainment research at the University of Virginia Darden School of Business. NAMIC's award-winning Executive Leadership Development Program, ELDP, is offered in partnership with Darden, making Anthony very familiar with NAMIC and the important work we do. Before we dive in, just a few housekeeping notes. If you have questions, please drop them in the Q&A section. Anthony will do his best to answer them all, and this is a very interactive session. This session is being recorded, and a link will be shared with all registrants afterwards. We'll kick things off with an introductory video about Anthony, and then we'll jump right in.
Series on SVOD service. Our original series on SVOD services important. We think about Shrinking on Apple. We think about Netflix's House of Cards, Stranger Things, Orange is the New Black, Squid Game. I devised a model that really looked at how consumers perceived Netflix and a bunch of other streaming services and how these perceptions inform brand loyalty and brand equity. One of the key findings of the study was that, in fact, original series can contribute toward propensity to have brand loyalty, so sticking with a brand, and also brand equity, seeing the value added by having a Netflix subscription or an Apple subscription. This is quite interesting because it really gets into what's currently going on in the industry. A lot of SVOD services have had to reconcile how much original series they have and how much do they need to have. We think about Netflix. Look at your kiosk. There's so much original content on there. You may not see it all. Netflix has an opportunity here, though, to refine how each consumer segment that they have may perceive them. So they may market some shows to a particular segment because they want them to see Netflix as bold and cool. They may want another segment to see them as brainy or cerebral. And so if we have this opportunity, then we become kind of a Target or a Walmart where we're servicing everybody. But we can quickly realize that that might cut into operating margins and a few other places in which it's difficult to be everything to everybody. Really what it comes down to for SVOD services is being more judicious with the kind of original content that you devise and making sure somebody's going to be there to watch it.
All right. Without further ado, Anthony Palomba.
Thank you so much, Susan. Hey guys, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you very much for having me. And that video really does encapsulate a lot of my passions around this particular industry. When I had first created that particular model, which is now in some academic study that you may or may not be interested in reading, I can certainly provide a PDF version of it at the end of the session, really ignited a lot of different foci for me looking at how the streaming industry has been evolving. Over the past few years, it's become quite clear to me that for a lot of streaming services, it's been difficult to figure out what kind of content to use, how much of it to have, and frankly, how to begin to measure things differently. What you're going to see today is one presentation on Superstar Effect, just looking at the power of different TV series impacts on SVOD services. How many do we need? Do they really push the needle like we think they do if we have an onslaught of a lot of TV series that are being licensed and produced? The first video that you had watched was from several years ago and is an older study that had not been exposed to the deluge of content that we've had over the last few years. Additionally, I've also begun looking at TV scripts for natural language processing. I've done this because I know what keeps all of us up at night. For one, thinking through the kinds of TV series that we need to monetize. Two, being sure that what we select is good. And three, trying to be preemptive, trying to begin to think about, well, Jesus, if I'm going to invest in a TV series, how can I be smart about testing the content or having a sense of whether the content will work or not? So I'm going to get into the first presentation, which is going to look at superstars. The second presentation is also going to introduce an interactive dashboard in which I have TV scripts that have been analyzed by natural language processing, and I've been able to pick out different pieces of dialogue, uh, kind of emotions, if you will, from acts 1 through 3. We'll go through that, and then at the end, this is something I'm currently working on, is looking at genre evolution over time based on these TV dialogue snippets to begin to understand how were comedies written in the 90s, how were comedies written in the aughts, what can we begin to systematically understand about how we resonate with content and how we might want content to resonate with us moving forward. Let me just check the chat. Remember if you have any questions. Yes, thank you very much, Amy. Yeah, please, feel free to ask questions. I am going to do my best to keep checking. I want this to feel as interactive and as loose as possible. There will be numbers that will be thrown your way from time to time, but I'm going to try to make this as entertaining and not as academic-y as possible so that we know what to pull and that you guys are leaving with nuggets, right? Nuggets of information that are going to help make your day-to-day lives just a little bit better, a little bit easier. So let's get started with the first presentation that I have for all of you. And that is going to be this presentation. Terrific. So series superstars, how streaming video on demand, pardon me, I've got so many, this is what happens with Zoom. Let me just move this guy. I'm going to be moving this. I have a feeling, so just bear with me. There's not much else going on the screen. But I also want to be sure that I can kind of see everybody. Series superstars, how streaming video on demand content popularity informs SVOD platform demand. This came out from a Variety article that I had read surrounding how much original content does an SVOD service need. It's great that I was able to demonstrate empirically that, yes, brand loyalty, brand equity, all of these things that we might worry about as marketers can be raised through original content. But how much of it do you need? And we're in a space in which there are people who are constantly competing for more and more stuff. So, Emmy nominations. This paper began around, as I said earlier, an article from Variety, and it actually dealt with Emmy nominations. Emmy nomination win multiples in 2021 and 2022 for SVOD services were close, with Disney Plus and HBO Max performing the best. And as we can see here, about 4.72 average number of Emmy nominations needed for one win, right? So this is pretty difficult. This is pretty hard to get a win. You have to really have great content to just be noticed. But production budget multiples were incredibly high and unsustainable. And we're seeing this now currently, right? We're seeing a lot of different streaming services begin to reconcile just how much can we spend and how much can we be invested in particular pieces of content. We can see here, given the key that we have here with production budget and Emmy nominations, the budgets can be quite high at times, compared for the Emmy nominations versus the Emmy wins, right? And so thinking this through a little bit more then, are these streaming services kind of beating themselves up for no reason? Not no reason, I'm being a bit facetious, but to the extent to which they're bending over backwards, investing in a lot of these superstar series, which I've defined in the study as kind of the top 1% of TV series. Now, granted, a lot of these executives won't know off the bat, oh, this TV series is going to be a hit. It's going to be fantastic. But if you put Ben Stiller and Adam Scott both behind Severance on Apple, chances are it's going to do pretty well. And you're probably going to have a lot of upfront production budget costs, right? And that's going to force you to really reconcile, do I want to keep spending money in season two, or do I cancel early so that I don't have to pay out residuals to creatives that are a part of this? So there are a lot of moving pieces here in thinking through how much superstar content we really need. And as you can see here, $100 million spent for the Emmy nomination, but $631 million average spend for Emmy win. Again, incredibly, incredibly unsustainable. And we've seen the headlines here, right? Through and through. Hollywood is paying a steep price for never really figuring out the streaming model. It's an explosion inside the rise of high costs for obtaining scripts and the like. Disney's entertainment streaming business ekes out surprise profit as Disney Plus core subscribers top 117 million. I do think there has been some good news in the last year that it does seem a lot of these services, at least based on the investor calls I listened to, are doing a lot better. And they are beginning to turn profits. So the study focus here is really thinking through, as I mentioned earlier, superstar series and content library quality. In other words, simply put, do you need a ton of superstar hits, or should you be thinking about raising the mean quality of your content library, right? Thinking a little bit about the floor more than the ceiling. So the emphasis on superstar series is to cut through noise on SVOD services. We know this, but it's kind of a carousel of chaos, right? Consumers find hit series and move from SVOD service to SVOD service. I'm certainly guilty of this. Although I will say I'm beginning to kind of bud as an Apple fan. I'm watching the morning show. I know I'm behind. I've been watching Severance, and I think I'm going to go after Silo as well. But these are all kind of hit-making kinds of content. Amid all of this, should SVOD platforms work on improving the overall popularity of their content or focus on developing superstar series, right? And so, let me see this. Love Severance. Oh, good. I'm happy to hear this. So theoretical framework here, and I don't want to bore you guys too much about with academic jargon, as I promised that I wouldn't, but I do want to couch this a little bit in some theory to help us understand where is this coming from. So the superstar effect was coined by a business scholar, Rosen, in 1981, who just simply pointed out that there are particular people in an industry that earn the lion's share of content, right? Juan, I can make anything and everything available to you guys, no problem. You will not have to write down a single thing, sir, insofar as the slides are concerned. And that goes to everybody here. I can make it a point right after to share stuff, no problem. So amidst the backdrop of the superstar effect, it's possible to begin to consider original content as superstars, and as each episode as an output of talent, essentially, right? And so in thinking this through, there's a new generation of firms that are coming through to evaluate and assess and judge and measure audiences, which I'm super, super interested in. These firms include Samba TV, Video Amp, Diesel Labs, and Parrot Analytics. This data set is based on Parrot Analytics, which I was really, really thrilled to be able to receive. At this juncture, I would argue audience measurement is at an intertidal point as well. So it's not just a matter of there are a select group of people that make the lion's share of salary in an industry, or there's a select few TV series that earn the lion's share of audience ratings at this point. But there is momentum among these audience measurement firms to begin to get more granular and to begin to understand in the vast, vast ecosystem of social media, of looking up TV series, watching TV series, what is the actual audience engagement with a TV series across all of those platforms, and not just worrying about whether or not Anthony saw Severance recently. Granted, that's important, but am I looking it up? Am I doing other things? What kinds of engagement am I having? And so the research gap here is, as you might note, quite clear. We don't know how many superstars or how much momentum should be behind superstar series for creating value for SVOD services. I mentioned Parrot Analytics earlier. Parrot Analytics, the audience data that this study was based on, deals with combining downloads and views, online searches, and social media posts. So again, broadening out our understanding of what does it mean to really measure an audience member, and that it shouldn't begin or really end in front of the TV screen. That should just be one facet of the way that we begin to understand our audiences in a very holistic way. So data collection, I promise you we're getting to the results. In this study, we looked at my research colleague and I, Nicole Fleskes, who's an incredible economics PhD candidate now at Rice University. She is just a banger. She is amazing. In this study, we selected 110 series across SVOD services. We had a stratified sampling technique, so we just basically cut them down from whether they were superstar at the 1% level of popularity, mild popularity, and low popularity. And we looked at daily demand for content. And so if you're not familiar with Parrot Analytics, they have an audience number for every day based on demand for content. And it's not just about whether or not somebody has seen, again, the TV series. It's a holistic measurement. So we looked at Amazon Prime Video, Hulu, HBO Max, Apple TV Plus, Netflix, and Disney. Back in 2021, they comprised about 81% of market demand share. It made sense to look at them. And we looked at daily aggregate demand from August 23rd, 2021 to about July 16, 2022. So just shy of a year. We had about 35,000 data points from this as a result. Data definitions, just before we get into things, popularity was normalized between 0 and 1, just kind of as a scaling. We went over superstars, and the new subscriber share is % of new subscriptions obtained by SVOD providers. So, descriptive. I will explain these arrows. I know that there's a lot. It's meant to confuse you because SVOD services needed to excel on one of these dimensions in order to raise prices, which is the top determinant surrounding whether or not consumers will continue to subscribe to a service. What we found here is that there were no true indicators for whether or not a particular measure would be up or down. So as you can see here, for instance, Amazon raised its price during this time period. Average popularity went up, but its Superstar series went down, and its new subscriber share by platform went down as well. And we can see this all over here. What's the main takeaway from here? There is not one rule or one path to beginning to think through whether or not to raise prices, which is critical when you're thinking about keeping your audience. So, preliminary observations from this study: popularity across SVOD platforms follows seasonal trends. Second, possessing the highest subscriber share is not necessarily correlated with the highest percentage of superstar programs. And then finally, SVOD platforms with lower or higher prices are inclined or disinclined to gain new subscribers, but retain less or more overall subscriber shares. So you can begin to get a sense of, even with raising prices, who are you retaining and who are you keeping, right? If you are raising your prices, chances are it might keep people out, but it also might retain people who are within because they may be getting some sort of valued offering from the content that they're getting from the service itself here. Did Amazon purchase MGM library during that time? I believe that they might. I think it was just before, because I remember reading that. And I think what wound up happening, pardon me, Theard, or T-Herd, pardon me, I know that's not your name. T-Herd 082, I think what was going on with Amazon is they bought the MGM library, and then they didn't really have much buzz. Like, they obviously had Mozart in the Jungle, they had Marvelous Miss Maisel. More recently, they've had some noise with Mr. and Mrs. Smith. If you guys missed it, James Bond is now under the auspices of Amazon. That was a massive piece of breaking news this past week. And I think it demonstrates that, at least for Amazon, you know, being able to find and figure out different kinds of content is critical. And it is it's a never ending battle, so to speak. So for modeling, we went into kind of a structural demand model. This is meant to kind of look at audience popularity and think through the utility that audiences get, which is essentially what this model is looking at. It looks at the average utility, the average value that an audience member gets from, the particular catalog, overall popularity of the service, as well as the percentage of the service here. And so this is the model. I won't spend too much time on this, but essentially we were controlling for consumer income, other unobserved characteristics, price, and catalog interests. That's all you need to know here. And so here, how much, if we look at the top here, how much do consumers care about Superstar Series, the average popularity of an SVOD services catalog, and the variance of this particular popularity? And so you can see here at the key insight, I have what I have to show here because I need to do my due diligence, but I also don't want this to be too mathy. Let's look at the insight in the bottom left-hand corner. These results suggest that consumers do care about the average popularity of an SVOD's services catalog, and to a lesser extent, Superstar Series. These results also suggest that consumers dislike it when there's large variation in popularity, right? We've had this before. Stranger Things on Netflix. Oh my God, what a high. Well, what do I do after? There's an issue with having superstar hit after superstar hit after superstar hit, right? There's kind of this as I mentioned earlier, kind of a carousel of chaos from people jumping to one to the other, but also raising the creative bar to say, yeah, you just did Stranger Things, Netflix. What else you got? So rather than trying to top Stranger Things, you might think about raising your content library's quality. And I will say Netflix has done, I would think, among the streaming services, because they've had so many banger hits anyway. If you look at their content library, they've really built the rest of it out, not necessarily worrying about hits all the time. Once again, we're going to do the same thing. I'll just read the research question, and I've got the insights here. How much does consumer demand for an SVOD provider change? They do improve the overall popularity of their catalog or increase the amount of Superstar Series. So here's our insight right in the bottom left-hand corner. In summary, consumer demand does not change greatly. We find that consumer demand is relatively inelastic to changes in average popularity and percentage of Superstar Series of an SVOD services catalog. However, consumer demand is much less responsive to changes in percentage of Superstar Series compared to changes in popularity. So once again, we're seeing that consumers aren't always motivated or pushed by superstar hit series, right? There might be little blips here and there, but it may not have the retaining power that we might have thought 5, 6, 7 years ago when everybody had to have, a ton of streaming hits. The market has evolved such that thinking through not just getting the banger hits, but also getting content to retain audiences may prove more fruitful. Final, I think this is, this is my last research question. How does the landscape of streaming market change if an SVOD service increases their catalog's average popularity or the percentage of Superstar Series within their catalog? And so if you see here, we kind of did a simulation where we were looking at this paired analytics data, and essentially this is what we found. So we did a 10% increase in the average popularity of an SVOD's catalog results in an increase in the new subscriber share of the SVOD platforms, but it could also mean a decrease in the new subscriber share across rival platforms. And so you can see here, HBO and Apple TV have the most to gain here when it comes down to thinking through how to raise and increase popularity here. right? Juliana, yeah, that's completely it. If I had to summarize this particular study, that's kind of a big find, right? That if you are in fact focusing so much on superstar hits, well, why would I need to look for anything else? I could just go discover another hit series, right? And we know that channels traditionally have not been built on that. And that the appeal of discovery is very much germane to the manner in which we consume content, right? Like we get excited when we find good stuff, and it's not always in the zeitgeist. Um, and so research question 3 continued. We also did a 10% increase in the percentage of superstar series of an SVOD's catalog. So this results in an increase in the new subscriber share of that SVOD platform, a decrease in the new subscriber share across rival SVOD platforms. And what we find here is that essentially Disney and Netflix have the most to gain. Okay, perfect. And so in summary, between the first portion of the RQ3, and this portion, this is what you need to know. In summary, we find that SVOD services can charge higher prices, garner a larger share of new subscribers when they increase either the average popularity of their catalog or percentage of superstar series. You can kind of go either way. Additionally, we find that both strategies are beneficial to consumers. However, we find that increases in an SVOD service's average popularity of their catalog have a higher impact than increases in the percentages of superstar series. So again, if for nothing else you take from this study, start thinking about your floors rather than your ceilings so much for content. And so the discussion here, just to wrap up this study, and I will take a break for a few minutes to chat with everybody before the next study. Our results suggest that consumers are highly interested in SVOD platforms that have highly popular content. They don't want variance. They really, really do not like variance. This is something to really be mindful of, that being preventative in the manner in which we have wild variation is critical to maintaining and really staving off churn, maintaining subscribers and staving off churn. Additionally, possessing a large subscriber share is not necessarily correlated with possessing a high percentage of superstar series. So the study found that consumers prize low popularity variance across content, deriving greater utility from less vacillation. Finally, consumers' demand for an SVOD platform, however, did not fluctuate much based on price changes to other SVOD platforms. So it's important that SVOD platforms really think through the consumers they want, how to retain them, and begin to think through licensing relevant content to them rather than trying to make waves in the zeitgeist. It's obviously important. It's obviously a strategy that can work, of course. Certainly Disney, Netflix, they may benefit from that more than other streaming services. Other streaming services may really pay more attention to their floors, a bit more. Theoretical implications, this kind of just advances our understanding of superstar hits. As I mentioned earlier, I would argue down here, smaller services would do well to cut down on the amount of content produced, which I know sounds blasphemous and maybe heretical. But focusing on limiting popularity variance across content might actually prove to be more fruitful than going after massive banger hits, right, in this particular age in the streaming marketplace. It has implications for content acquisition, right? Thinking through, are we adopting something? Are we creating something new? What are we doing here? And does it pay to have these splashy shows as a marketing tool if we're not getting the retention that we want? And so that's pretty much the paper here. Again, we used a novel Parrot Analytics data set, and the conclusion pretty much kind of rounds out what I've just stated insofar as concluding the study. I am happy to pause for a little bit here just to see if there are any questions, just to see if anybody has any questions, and then we'll get to the next presentation, which will include an interactive dashboard. I kind of want to have some fun with you guys. So happy to pause for a little bit.
Anthony, we have a question from Cliff.
Yeah,
He said, most of this study is from 2021 to 2022. Are these
yes.
trends still going, are these trends still true going into 2024, 2025, and beyond?
Yeah. So I think what you're seeing, and it would really would be great to do this study again. And I'll be I'll be barefaced with you, Cliff. Parrot Analytics gave me the subscription. They did not give me the data. I had to manually code for 110 TV shows every week, and I had to get their week ratings. It was not in an Excel file. Otherwise, I think I would have replicated this study, and frankly, I would have had a longer time period. I think what you're seeing is people are very much interested in content that is sticky. And so with Netflix going after NFL, with Apple and Amazon going after more sports stuff as well. Yeah, it is very painful, Cliff. I was kind of like, you've got to be like, I can pay, like, can you please give me the data? But it's fine. And so I think you're seeing a few things happening. One, certainly more live content. It's sticky. We're worried about engagement because priorities are shifting. We're a little bit less concerned about whether or not you watched on a streaming service, but more so about, did you stay? Did you stay to watch the advertisements, right? That's kind of a new feature here in the streaming marketplace. And if you're worried about having hit content all the time, that's not going to make sense. And it probably is less fruitful than it used to be. That isn't to say that you don't need hit series. I do think that you do. Um, but I do think that between that and also looking at other platforms to combine storytelling on is becoming very, very popular. We just saw Netflix beginning gaming. There have been murmurs about whether or not Amazon will kind of raise its and expand its gaming sphere. It's played with that. Um, and so you're also seeing platforms, you're seeing streaming services vetting different platforms to control attention. And that's another reason why Netflix is getting into podcasting. If you've not heard about that announcement, they're very much interested in thinking through engagement. And so engagement then I think would mean, can we get people to kind of binge watch Real Wives, right? That's kind of powerful. And is that more powerful than getting a 500,000 people or 1 million people to sit down to watch, season 4 of The Morning Show on Apple? And so I think you're seeing different priorities taking shape, especially with advertisers involved. Have you ever thought about using fanfic metrics to gauge a series or movies franchise popularity, say check numbers on what matters? Weird question. Um, I've thought about a lot of different resources, T Herd. It's definitely possible. It's a lot of this winds up coming, and I won't show you some of the code I'm working on, but like a lot of it comes down to data aggregation and just kind of getting resources and being able to combine things. And if you have, permissions and all of that kind of stuff. Oh, Terry Hurd. Pardon me, Terry. Let me not call you T Hurd. Belongs in the back of a football jersey, it sounds like. Terry. And so I'm very much interested in combining data sets. I always am. Um, in the next study I'm going to go through with you guys, I took 25,000 TV scripts, quote unquote, from a TV subcaption website, and I combined it with Nielsen ratings that I was able to find on Wikipedia, which, believe it or not, are cited. You have the sources. It's actually a good source for Nielsen ratings. And as everybody here knows, Nielsen plays things to the vest pretty closely these days. They've been under a little bit of fire here and there. And so that's certainly something to kind of think about moving forward. How does the switch to adding ads, even when the viewer pays for ad-free content, affect brand loyalty and churn? So I'm doing a lot of ad avoidance work right now. Actually, I'm reading a lot on that, and there was one just amazing study out of the Journal of Marketing, and they found that if advertisements are enjoyable, if they're pleasurable, if the information for the product is actually kind of tamped down a little bit, not isolating a problem you might have with your skin or anything, but making it more enjoyable, more fun, um, people are receptive to the advertisements, right? And we've seen some streaming services now front load advertisements. So I think there are a lot of models that are available based on how consumers want to consume content, but it seems like what's new is old. We've seen that repeatedly in the industry, and I think that that's going to kind of continue to be true. I don't think people are necessarily averse to advertisements. I think people are averse to broadcast type advertisements. Show me something different. Show me something cool, right? Show me a different way of advertising to me. Put differently, Terry, the biggest advertisers in the next decade are going to be TikTok influencers, um, unabashedly. I think that you're seeing celebrity branding not going away, but changing. Ryan Reynolds owns his own firms and companies and liquor to kind of hawk on his own. George Clooney, I think, started that trend. And so a lot of these celebrities are beginning to just own stuff. And so are TikTokers for that matter. And I do think in an age of loneliness, which we're all kind of unfortunately susceptible to, I think we have a huge loneliness issue crisis in this country. We're looking for people who are authentic, who feel like our friends, right? And so if we're all split with screens and stuff, it's quite powerful to have a TikToker that you resonate with, that you jive with, that you connect with, more so than a celebrity. And so I think through those pathways, Terry, advertisements and ad avoidance doesn't have to be such a scary topic. I just think it's a little bit more about thinking through how do we connect to people differently now. I'm a millennial. I'm going to be 38 in a few weeks. Um, I am going to have a baby girl in May. She's going to be Gen Alpha. The way that we're going to talk to me and to her are going to be totally different. And McKinsey had a paper, a white paper that came out, and they were talking about, thank you, and they were talking about how the future of mediums and storytelling is going to be at the nexus or at the axes, so to speak. So, if we're watching Severance, is some of it going to be gamified for all of us, and is some of it going to be passive? Right? We're getting toward that. Even adopting The Last of Us on HBO and being able to literally take I played the game, literally take scenes out of the game that are cinematic and refilming them with live actors is groundbreaking. Um, I know that was kind of a ramble, pardon me, but I hope that begins to kind of satiate some of the interest here. Let me just make sure. How can overall popularity be? Let me see if oh, okay. And how does switching, okay, I did. Oh, perfect. Raquel, how can overall popularity of an SVOD catalog be increased? Um, I think a few things. I think Severance, sorry, I keep talking about Severance. I did not mean to do so. It is top of mind for me. Apple did a funny thing where they licensed it to Roku for the weekend before, or I think the initial weekend for season 2. And that has proven to be like very, very um, it's created a spike in viewership for Severance and created interest in Apple TV. I think that's part of it. I think thinking through, what does overall popularity mean to you, Raquel? Does it mean getting new subscribers? Does it mean keeping people? Does it mean being part of the zeitgeist, right? Because you can capture different people based on different mechanisms. Mean Girls, a year ago, I think they came out with a new movie, right? Like 20 years later, they used TikTok and they cut the original Mean Girls movie into like 35 pieces and played it on TikTok. It also didn't compensate any of the creatives because they didn't have to based on the residual contract. That's neither here nor there as a way to build up popularity. Um, but I think succinctly put, if it's a small streaming service, Raquel, I would focus on raising the quality. I would focus on being able to deliver exactly what you think you're going to be delivering to your audience, listening to them, watching their patterns. It's also helpful, and I think this is one of the reasons why you see so much content being licensed all over the place, is you also get to learn about other audiences by doing that. As part of the contract, though I know it's not always the case, if you license content to other platforms, and granted they're rivals, you can begin to think about, well, can we learn something about that particular audience? Is that something that could be incorporated into the contract where we get some sort of data or some sort of output or some sort of notion of how it performed? Um, you know, I think that I hope what will wind up happening among the streaming services is that they all kind of look at each other as airplane companies, and they all have to use the same terminal, and they're all competing against each other. But the truth of the matter is, the ability to work together, the ability to figure out an audience currency, finally, hopefully, God willing, in 2025, that we can all agree on, will actually empower the industry against apex predators right now, who are the tech industry, who are measuring things, some of which I've already showed you, some of which I'm about to show you, um, in a way that creates more ownership over the industry. To Terry's point, the ability to make content discovery much easier is critical. I think that's why there's a place for Roku. I think that's why there's a place for smart TVs. Um, if they all work together, I really do believe that even being able to find content would be valuable. And frankly, if everything was bundled, and we're seeing these skinny bundles coming out again anyway, I think the ability to work together, frankly, would help the industry, in my humble opinion. Um, Cliff, is there any industry, oh, pardon me, is there any data on the downriver syndication aspect of series moving from a premium service like Apple or HBO to, say, a Hulu or Amazon? Man, streaming data is on, it is like Fort Knox. I have tried, I have networked, I have put on my professor hat. I have done what I have tried to do, to get more granular data, to begin to understand, to the point that we were talking about earlier. Yeah, like what would happen if The Sopranos was licensed to Netflix for a few months? Um, and how does that impact how Netflix does? How does that impact how, Max does? Um, I think that that model is from cable, right? I mean, The Office, Big Bang Theory, a lot of these TV series that used to earn massive residual checks would be on TNT, TBS. I mean, Law and Order was running on TNT for years with repeats. And so I do think what's new is old, or what's old is new, however you want to phrase that. And those kinds of behaviors, I think, are typical, because I do think that trying to capture consumer preferences is difficult. One thing I've wanted to measure in the future is the pop culture zeitgeist. Like, can you actually measure, through political measurements, socioeconomic measurements, household income measurements, the weather? Can you just get a sense of what's going on culturally, and synthesize and create synthetic data that you'd be able to begin to think about, this is the perfect time to license content, right? Like right now would be perfect for, this, and this TV series, or what have you. And maybe we can license it from Hulu or something. Um, but I think because a lot of these TV, SVOD services really play things close to the vest, you also have a lot of former executives that, I'm sure 20, 30 years ago, you had, 20 million hits or 20 million viewers a night, 30 million viewers a night, right? They're kind of embarrassed to talk about numbers. And unfortunately, I do think the transparency, is undermining the industry at large. I don't think there are any other questions here. Great. I'm excited for the second study that we're going to go through. There will be an interactive portion. There's a data dashboard that I am thinking, my pleasure, Cliff. Um, and I hope I've answered everybody's questions here. If I haven't, feel free to ask follow-ups. This data dashboard is a bit of a work in progress, but I'm really, really stoked to share it with all of you. As a preamble for this, I think that there are two ways to really do cutting edge research in media, in my opinion. One is recommendation systems, right? That has just really taken off in the last decade, let's say. And that deals with machine learning, some of the things I do. And they're very, very sophisticated models. There's a lot of hyperparameter tuning and other nerdy stuff that I won't get into. But I've spoken to executives who have expressed frustrations to me that they seem to be hitting a ceiling. And they've probably plateaued for now. There may be more technological advances and other things that we can concern ourselves with when those things happen. But there is something else. Thinking about measuring TV scripts before they're even produced. There is a wild, wild west going on right now in media, although the tech industry has been doing it for at least a handful of years, if not more, with unstructured data. This means measuring images, photos, video, and what you're about to see, dialogue, in a way to get more granular assessments through thinking about how we evaluate a script. And if you think about where a script begins, it's begun in a writer's room or somebody's written something, right? There's no one right path for anything in Hollywood. The way that a TV script is made, it's written, it's vetted, it goes into production, and then it's streamed or broadcasted. And then we get an audience rating report, and then we find out what's going on. You can't even see my fist anymore. They're not even on the screen. That is a long amount of time, ladies and gentlemen, to wait and figure out if this was right. And so it's very, very critical to begin to think about how we can be preemptive in measuring content and getting a sense of, even from dialogue, even from other things that we've looked at with TV scripts, can we begin to get into content analytics as a way to arm ourselves with thinking through licensing content, getting into series maintenance studies, thinking about how to write a ship for a TV series. When these things were available or existed in a script, the script performed well, these kinds of things. And so the last year I've begun looking at TV scripts, and I've begun looking through some of the things that are involved with this. I'm good, Amy. I think what I can do is I can go through this presentation a little bit quicker. And what I can do is I can end on that dashboard. I will also show you a sneak peek for what I plan to present a little bit more fleshed out in October for this conference that will look at genre evolution over time. And so I'm going to get into the second presentation. I'm going to go a little quick. Pardon me, guys. I know that we only have a few minutes here. And so what I might do, just because we're a little bit short on time, and hopefully that means that's a good thing. What I might do actually as I'm looking at this, I'm going to jump around a little bit, ladies and gentlemen, and then I'm just going to get right to the dashboard because I do want to hear from you. And so this is predicting viewership for the next episode using natural language processing to deconstruct TV dialogue. What I did was I used machine learning to look at 25,000 TV scripts. I pulled from Open Subcaption, which is a website with TV subcaption data. I don't have any character profiles. I have none of that. I'd like to. I might wind up talking to the Writers Guild of America so that I can get full scripts, although now I've got 1,700 movie scripts to look at for another study. So maybe that will be taken care of. But I was very much interested in dialogue. Dialogue enables us to create boundaries, constrictions, all of those things. And it also provides guardrails, so to speak, with what the TV series will be about and what it won't be about. And so I've mentioned that here. I've mentioned that here as well. And again, sorry for kind of going a little fast. Peak end theory is what has been used here. I'm very much interested in the peaks in a TV series as well as how it ends. If we're thinking about the intensities, the emotions, all of those things that spur people to watch the next episode. So that was my dependent variable, just to be clear. I was not worried about if you watched Seinfeld episode A, what emotions predicted you watching that. Who cares? How do those emotions in Seinfeld episode A lead you to Seinfeld episode B, right? How do we get you to watch the next one? And so I'm jumping, but I apologize. I ran a basic OLS regression. I'll just leave it at that. 39% predictive power. And then I did some robustness checks, let's say, with elastic net and gradient boosting Those are machine learning models I won't get into. But overall, I'm confident in saying that this model could predict 40% variance of watching the next episode. That being said, I imagine if character profiles, other information were made available, you would begin to see, maybe fluctuations there, hopefully going up for that matter. So what you can see here, and I know this is a lot, as you can see in Acts 1, we have Act 2, Act 1, Act 2, Act 1, Act 1, Act 1. What I want you to glean from this is that there are a lot of different dialogue features that can drive value. We can see this aggregated across comedy, right? So thinking about the amount of six-letter words you have, or whether you have disgust by one of the characters in the middle of a comedic episode, or thinking about word count, again, discussed here we think about drama, not being so certain in dramas, right? Feeling a little bit less confident, thinking about being authentic, less authenticity, right? Because if there's drama, there's a particular conflict that's going on. Having fear in a conflict. Oh no, right in the middle of the second act. Will he, won't he? Will she, won't she? Holy, how is this going to resolve itself? Think of Scandal. Think of 24, right? Really, really intense TV series. We also have crime here as well. Anger, in a crime show. Less anger in the second scene or second act. And that makes sense because crime tends to be kind of a brooding thing, right? The crime usually happens in Act 1. You think of any Law and Order TV series. And so you can kind of begin to get a sense of that. And this is kind of a demo of for two broke girls, you can begin to kind of get a performance set, if you will, of which features work best, right? And I recognize I haven't shared the natural language processing dictionary with you, but I do want to show you the dashboard here. And again, pardon me for going a bit quick, but this is dashboard that I built. And so you can see, and it's not public yet, but you can see TV series emotions. You can see kind of how there's different emotions that agglomerate onto different series. And you can see here, what's nice is that I've been able to automate this such that you can see positive and negative statistically significant relationships here that are easy for a writer to understand, easy for creatives to understand. Again, assuming they have the natural language processing dictionary, or it could be just having just more text written out. This is some of the stuff that I'm currently working on that I'll be presenting writ large in October. The other thing I wanted to share with you, and I do recognize we're running out of time, is I'm very much fascinated by thinking about different features. It's the same natural language processing here, different features that have spiked at different points during a particular genre. The way in which certain kinds of dialogue, certain kinds of emotion were relevant way back when, maybe are less so now. Maybe there's been a resurgence, right? And so you can imagine being able to do this kind of work really enables you to just kind of get a little bit more preemptive, a little bit more aggressive with the way in which you begin to look at and vet content. I'm going to pause, and I can stay on a little bit longer because I recognize we're kind of going over. But I enjoyed talking with all of you. I will stay on until there are no more questions to be asked. I am thrilled and grateful to have the opportunity to present with you. I will be presenting in October, and I hope to have more time to flesh out the NLP and genre stuff, though I think running out of time is a good problem. I think it means that we had a lot of energy here. Thank you very much for your time, guys. I just wanted to see if there are any questions here. Oh, perfect. So Amy's got the stuff here. Great. I will hang on if anybody wants to have a chat. Otherwise, thank you very much. The hour, oh my God, it flew. I hope this was worth your time. Thank you very much for your audience.